Yep. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. My name is John Beilenson. I am president of SCP, which is short for Strategic Communications and Planning. We are a socially responsible communications and public relations firm just out in Wayne, PA, and we have been working with the college on a number of projects here. Working with the dean, I have a long-standing relationship with the dean and helping her kind of promote her work more broadly. And we were responsible for the Purpose, I don't know if you've seen on the 10th, the People of Purpose posters and things like that project. In fact, there's I guess the second cohort is going to be announced next week as well, so I'll be back here for that. But we, in a lot of our work, we do a lot of work with academic leaders and innovators, and for over the last 20 years, we've actually developed a number of workshops focused on the communication skills that are really critical to building an academic career. And one of the things that has come up on a regular basis, and Guy, you mentioned this earlier, is posters, scientific posters. And one of the things that we have found is that scientific posters is a great way to learn a lot about communications. And in fact, today, let's see if I can get this over here. Where am I here?
Yeah, there you go.
All right. So, today, we're here to talk about posters. Actually, maybe not so much, right? So today, what we're really here to talk about is our communications and leadership, right? So our theory is that by learning how to do an effective poster, you actually learn a great deal about how to think effectively and strategically about a whole range of communications efforts. So, and that may be creating a brochure for a community project that you're working on. It may actually help you in writing grants and trying to figure out how to shape an argument in a way that makes sense for a particular kind of audience. It should help in your podium talks and maybe even in your teaching. So it's a way of sort of breaking down a complex communications challenge that can be applied in a number of ways. So again, yes, it's about posters, but maybe it's more than that. It's really about leadership ultimately. All right. So it's about posters. Well, not so much. It's not really about posters. The other thing I want to point out is that we focus a lot on what goes up on the poster, right? And there's the design, and in fact we will spend a good deal of time talking about that today. But in fact, what I'm also trying to get people to think about is that the success or failure of a poster is not necessarily about focused on the design of the poster and the science that goes up on the poster, but it's actually the experience of the poster session, right? Which includes the poster behind you, but is really centered around a series of interactions that you have over the course of an hour and a half in that session, right? So if success, if we think about poster success as getting the best possible poster up on the wall, that focuses us in a particular way. But it's better to really think about sort of this poster session and what success looks like in that broader context in order to understand how to create an experience that is good for you and will help move your research and your work forward. All right. You have a question? Okay. So that's sort of some framing comments. So today what we're going to do is we'll talk about some of the challenges. We'll talk about 4 steps to effective posters. We have a little exercise here, a little worksheet to play with, and then we'll review a couple of posters that folks submitted, and we'll discuss those a little bit further. So, trying to be as hands-on, as helpful as possible, and I'll be available to actually consult on poster development going forward. If you have one that you'd like me to take a look at, I'd be happy to do that as we go. Go ahead. All right. So what are the challenges that people say? Well, the first one that everybody, I think I've heard, is that we don't have enough time. And in fact, we're all busy and have all sorts of responsibilities. You're just talking about your grant responsibilities. There are all sorts of teaching responsibilities. And then all of a sudden, there's a poster that we have to get done, and we kind of figure that out. We finally, it finally gets to the top of the agenda, maybe, I don't know, a day before the poster session, a week before the poster session, 10 days before the, with not a significant amount of time. Now, and I will say that putting together an effective poster, and particularly the graphic design, is challenging, and there is also the production that's associated with it. So you have to get it printed, and you may have to ship it somewhere. So you do need time, and not having enough time is certainly a challenge. The second piece that people complain about, and rightly so, is that they don't know about graphic design. I took a year of graphic design as an undergraduate. By the end of my whole year, 2 semesters in graphic design, they allowed us to do a poster. We did a poster as our final project. It was 2 feet by 3 feet, 24 by 36, much smaller than yours. It had 9 words on it, as I recall. 9 words, okay? So after a year of graphic design, they allowed us to do a poster with basically a headline on it, right? This is a complex graphic design challenge, and one of the things I suggest to people, and you'll see this, is that you get some help around the graphic design. You find templates and other things that can help you, make choices around the graphic design. So you're not making those choices, because chances are you're not going to make great choices, because again, this is not an easy thing. This is not an easy graphic design challenge. So some of us are introverts, right? And so the prospect of actually going to a poster session where there are hundreds of posters right next to each other and all these people and interacting with strangers, et cetera, that just gives us all the, gives us the willies. So part of us are, some of us are not very happy about that, and hopefully this session will give you a little bit more confidence and maybe a way of thinking about those interactions and what that, so that reduces your anxiety and also increases your effectiveness. And the final, for the extroverts out there in the room, the other side of the coin is like, oh, I'm going to go there and it's going to be, I'm going to have my beautiful poster up there and no one's going to stop. Right, and so no one will. So there won't be any mayhem around my poster. There'll be no, and it'll be embarrassing, etc. And hopefully, again, this session will help you develop a approach to posters that can attract the right kinds of people, a number of people to the poster, and then create sort of these interactions that are really helpful to you in your research. All right. So 4 steps from prepared to perfect. Right. So what are the 4 steps? Think strategy. Get on message, hone your design, practice your pitch, okay? And we'll spend a little time at the end on the pitch. The pitch is, everybody always forgets the pitch, okay? Because in fact, you show up and you're like, you spent all this time on this poster, and then someone says, oh, so tell me a little bit about your research, or tell me a little bit about this poster, and you kind of go, and you can then spend 5 or 6 minutes. You can probably do 6 or 7 minutes working them all the way around the poster, during which time they're looking to the next place, et cetera, and really you need 30 seconds. You need a tight 30 to get you through that initial interaction, and practicing that pitch is really important. So I want to make sure that we have time for that. You won't practice it here, but I want to emphasize that's certainly something you should be thinking about. So let's think about, and again, this is all of these. If you think about it, all of these steps are part of a lot of communications challenges, right? So you have the strategic, the conceptual piece of it. Right, so you think about, and I'll go through the various steps around strategy. Then you have to figure out what it is you want to say, your message, right? Then you're going to figure out how to perform that message, right? Either through, it could be a journal paper, it could be a podium presentation. In this case, it's a poster presentation, and then you have to actually put it on its legs and make it go. So all of these steps are the same kinds of steps you'll use in a variety of communications challenges. So what do we mean when we think about strategy? Well, 3 things: objective, environment, and audience. Okay, I'll say a little bit about each of them, right? So the first thing you want to know is your objective, and it's a little hard to see the bottom here, but it says, I want the whole package, the little bowl, the colored pebbles, the plastic castle, right? So you need to know what it is that you're trying to achieve with the poster, and particularly in the poster session. Now, most of us have sort of a general sense of what we want, but if you probably have heard of SMART objectives, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic or relevant, time-bound, and time-bounded, right? So oftentimes we think about a sort of a general or sort of a fuzzy goal, or objective. In terms of your posters, you want to think about a SMART objective, right? So you may have a fuzzy objective of wanting to make a successful presentation about my research at X meeting in 2020, right? Okay, yes, that went, but what does that actually mean? Right, so a SMART objective would be in preparation for, participation in, and follow-up to Translational Science 2020, connect with 5 key academic leaders who provide constructive feedback and or support to my research agenda. All right, so it's time-bounded, right? So 2000 translation, it's obviously specific, it's measurable, right? 5 key academic leaders, and again, probably realistic, attainable, and certainly relevant to the work that you're trying to do. Now, note that this objective contains, right, the audience, which we'll get to in just a second, but the audience is really critical here. So who do you really want to be connecting with at the session, and to what end, right? So maybe you're looking for feedback on your methodology, right? Maybe you're looking at trying to figure out what the next, what the next research question is. Maybe you're looking for a job, right? And I will say, I've talked to a number of senior researchers, and they recruit into their labs based on posters. They walk around, they figure if you can't get your argument down on a poster, there's no way you'll be able to write a grant. So they figure, like, look, if he or she can make that argument on the poster and then can stand up and explain it, it's like, oh, those are some core competencies that I want in my lab. And then, again, the point of bringing someone in the lab is obviously to support them and their work, but really actually to help build. They want people that are going to become independent and move on and be successful. So that's how they're making their choices. And so a poster can be a powerful job boost as well. All right. So again, you start with the objective. The second thing is to sort of understand the environment, right? So when we're creating our posters, right, we're in a very quiet place. We're looking at our screen. It's very thoughtful. It's more like the picture on the top right, right? Maybe we invite somebody in to kind of to look at the poster, and then it's sort of like the second one here on the left, right, where it's a nice little interaction, quiet, peaceful, etc. And then in fact we get to the poster session and it's more like the whitewater, right? Things are crazy, right? We have lots of people all over the place. You're competing with all sorts of other people. The audience is moving, right? They're not standing there still. They may be eating or drinking, right? So it's a completely different environment. So you have to make sense of that environment. Also, Murphy's Law of posters is that your poster will be in the place that has the worst lighting of the entire place. So I don't know how it works. And I suspect only one person or one group of posters can be in the worst place, but I don't know. I think my experience with folks is that they always seem to end up in the worst space. And I think the deal is that the lighting is often actually pretty terrible. And so you have to make sense of that as well. And so readability is really important as we think about the design of the poster. So you have to understand the environment, and then ultimately the audience, right? So who are you dealing with here, right? So as I said, these are scientists. They are people on the move, and they are, but they may not be. They probably don't know that much about your particular area. They may be in different disciplines, right? Or they may be a nurse, or they may be a PA or a doc or something like that, depending on what the meeting is about, right? Or they may have some kind of related experience, but they're not the people that you know. Now, I love telling this. The importance of knowing your audience is critical, because if your poster is set up for a general audience and it doesn't really focus in on the people you're trying to engage, you're going to miss the mark. And that's what happened with me and this group of young men here who I coached. This is my son's first grade Little League team, and I was idealistic sort of volunteer coach, and showed up with my cap and my clipboard and set up an hour-and-a-half practice for them and had them doing all these various things. And when I got there, I realized I had made a number of major miscalculations, right? First of all, these guys are incredibly cute, but you can tell and probably imagine, if you have any experience with seven-year-olds, they basically have the attention span of a swarm of gnats, right? So an hour and a half, completely unrealistic, and in fact, after the first couple practices, and I was tearing my hair out, etc., we made them 45-minute practices, and we sent them to the playground for the last 15, because I would send them back to their parents, but their parents wouldn't show up in under an hour. They wanted to wait. They didn't want their kids back for that long. So anyway, but 45 minutes was about as much as they could take, particularly after a whole day of school, which is a big deal for them, right? Second thing is that they knew nothing about baseball, nothing. So I knew it had to be basic. I mean, my son is the intellectual kid with his tongue sticking out of his hand over his face, and I had practiced with him, and I knew they didn't know much about baseball. But the first practice, I said, okay, we'll keep it simple. We all lined up we all sat at home plate, right? And I said, okay, we're going to run to first base. So 4 guys, boom, straight to first base. 4 guys go to third base. right? 4 guys sit there and kind of can't figure out whether to go to first or third base. Like, it seems like a pretty even vote, right? So I realized at that moment, even some of the basic things that I thought I was going to teach were not even basic enough. So again, I had totally and I think while your audience will be a little bit more sophisticated, chances are in general we overestimate the amount. Well, we overestimate 2 things in our communications. One is that people know more than they know something like what we know, right? And we have this, and what we really need to do is recover the sort of the beginner's mind. We have to go back to sort of, well, how would I teach this to my Aunt Ida, or to at least somebody who is a beginning student, for example, and to start there to move people along. And the second thing we overestimate is that people really care, right? And that's the other thing we forget to note, which is sort of why should you pay attention to this poster or to this communication I'm giving. And so you really need to, in all your communications, you have to make sure that you demonstrate the case for why people should pay attention. So anyway, I like to show this picture. I love to tell the story. My son is now 22. He just graduated from university. Actually just got his EMT here at Drexel. In fact, this past semester, he's now 6 feet tall and has a beard and everything like that. So they do grow up, and I don't know if he knows anything more about baseball at this point, but that part is not as relevant.
At least he knows where first base.
He does. He knows where first base is now. Exactly. That's a good. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that now going forward. So some strategy considerations that we've talked about. So the first thing is our objective is not putting the poster, but it's really about engagement. So like, what kind of engagement are we really trying to have, and with whom, right? That's first job 1, right? As I said, it's a poorly lit, it's a competitive environment, it's a scientific audience, but they're moving, right? You are in control. That's it. You are in control of the message. It's all communications is collaborative, right? It's a collaborative meaning making, but you have the ability to start the conversation and to put what you want up on the poster. Obviously, you have a large visual format. So what does that mean? And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a second. And then finally, this is really meant. That poster is meant to be a conversation starter, right? It's meant to kind of prompt a set of questions and a kind of conversation. It's not a mini paper. And again, I think most people, and you'll see that even the ones that people submitted to me today, they really follow the traditional, and that's the traditional poster format, is they follow the paper format, starting with an introduction and working with background, and then methods and analysis, discussion, the results, discussion, conclusion, and those kind of core pieces. And those are important, but they don't necessarily have to, it's not one after the other necessarily. And in fact, that's the main problem with about 90% of the poster designs that you'll see, is that they kind of they wander through that kind of snake design, and all the good stuff ends up in places that are not very visible, right? So that's where that's the main design change that we're gonna try to talk about. So that's strategy, right? So the second thing is around message, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about message. The first thing I love, and this is a great New Yorker cartoon. If you were to boil your book down to a few words, what would be its message, right? And so I love that, in so much as what we're asking you to do in terms of the poster is to take this research that you care a great deal about. You spent weeks, months, years maybe, right, on this research, and now we're asking you to put it to say what's most important about it in a sentence or two, right? So it feels like I have this whole tome of it. I mean, if you only knew the complexity, right? But in fact, what is being asked by your audience is something much simpler and much more basic, right? And indeed, a good message, and understanding a good message, has 4 points. You need to answer the sort of the following statements. The one thing your audience needs to know is, and in fact, in the context of a poster, that's job 1. You have to do that for sure. The second is the reason this is important, why they should care, right? What the audience should do. In this case, there isn't really much to do, except if you were trying to kind of set up a meeting with them, and you probably wouldn't put that up on the poster. That might be part of your conversation, but you may want to think about what you want them to do. And then ultimately, why it's urgent for the audience to act now. Now, this comes from Valerie Denny, a very communications consultant in Chicago that we work with. And I think this is very helpful, at least in helping you think about how you might write a message that is compelling. And today we'll focus really on the first thing. What is the one thing your audience needs to know about your research about your poster? All right. Second thing is that once you kind of generally have sort of thought about that, you need to kind of adapt it right to your audience and the particular people that you're concerned about, and that will have to do with their values, about their expectations, and ultimately you may have a couple of audiences that you're trying to sort of engage. And so, like, if you're really looking for, if you want sort of research sort of guidance from a senior group, that's one thing. But if the methodologists or the people you're trying to engage, you may have to sort of balance the message so it captures both of those audiences, and that can be challenging, certainly. But the most important thing is that if you can identify a priority audience, then you can help shape the messaging much more helpfully. All right. There are obviously challenges. Oftentimes, again, in scientific writing and in all of our communications, there is a certain amount of complexity, there's jargon, there's opacity or abstraction, and a sort of a lack of emotion, right? All of this is part and parcel of traditional scientific communication. And, again, I'm not suggesting that you throw all of that out, but in so much as you can simplify the language, if you can avoid using jargon, or at least explaining your jargon so that the people that are not exactly in your field can still understand it, that can be really helpful. And if you can write with some emotion or with some sense of a concrete sense of the work, that'd be great. And again, you want to make sure it's still on key. Again, you can't be so crazy in your poster and in your language. It can't be it can't be a rap song, or hip hop song, on the poster. It has to seem like a scientific communication. And in fact, we'll talk a little bit about this better poster. Mike Morrison's idea about better posters that are really changing this what is sort of on key quite dramatically, and gives us a lot more freedom in what we're allowed to do. So that's the strategy, and that's message. So I'm going to take a breath, and so can you. And what I'd like you to do, and hopefully the folks on the can take a look at this as well, is to spend just a minute to think about your next poster session. Or one that maybe you've just done. It's about to be happening. Okay, good. So think about the poster session. What is what is an objective for the poster session? Who is the target audience, right? And try to be and then what would be the main message for that objective in the audience. So we'll give you about 5 minutes to do that. And hopefully folks on the phone have the
Yeah, Mona and Tiffany, did you guys get the things that I forwarded to you this morning?
Oh, I didn't, but I can check right now.
Yeah, I just sent it right after I sent you the Zoom link, Mona. I sent you another thing that John asked to be forwarded to.
Okay, in the same email thread?
In the same email thread, yes.
Okay.
Is there anything in addition to the PowerPoint? Because I just got the PowerPoint.
Oh, that's all you sent me was the PowerPoint.
Oh, I sent you another. I thought I sent you a document.
No, I think that's all I got was the PowerPoint.
Well, I sent you one earlier, but then I sent a second one. I don't know. Sorry. Let me shoot. So there are 3 questions. What is the objective of the poster? Right. For example, to find 2 potential collaborators, or to meet and engage a potential funder, or to get 5 people's feedback on the poster. That's an objective. The second question is, who is your target audience? And you want to try to be as specific as possible. And the third one is, what is your main message?
I'm sorry, I didn't receive that.
Okay. Thought I sent it, but maybe I didn't.
Can't tell you how many times I leave things in drafts thinking that they're
could be
on their way.
Could be. Let's see. I just sent. Oh, you're right. It says, here's my deck for today. I sent.
Get it to you in a few seconds.
Okay, I just sent it. Great. I'll let you know as soon as I got it.
Are you connected to Dragonfly 3?
Dragonfly,
Yes.
It's dead. Taking the inbox now, but.
Is it big?
Well, it should be. It's just a Word document. Or send the PDF maybe. It's 15 X. It's pretty big for Word. All right. So unfortunately, we're probably not going to be able to get you that on time here. It's no, there's something that just got sent. Let's see if there we go. Okay. I don't know why that was so big. Oh, 855. Anyway. Did that go through?
I haven't gotten it yet.
Okay. All right. We'll keep going here. So maybe we can, Guy, you willing to share, or yeah, Guy, why don't you share maybe what you've your sense of objective target audience and message for either a current or a upcoming.
Yeah. So I'm going to a local conference that's primarily focused on practitioners.
Yeah.
Which is not normally the kind of conference that I would go to, but
That's good.
pretty much my entire lab is going. So,
Yep.
And I submitted and got accepted for a poster there. So I am interested in finding two people who would be interested in collaborating on future research. They don't have to be kind of primarily researchers, maybe administrators, program managers, that kind of thing, who you know, be interested in working on kind of this work. So the target audience is kind of split. It needs to be at least vaguely interesting to the primary audience, which is practitioners of trauma-informed therapies, which is the purpose of the conference. But I want it to be specifically interesting to people who are involved in more of the data side or the administrative side of mental health care.
Right.
And so my main message is that when screening outside of mental health care, many children who've had traumatic experiences are not receiving any mental health services, and certain variables that we discussed in the poster are associated with a higher level of this disparity.
Right.
So
so again, it's the only question was only why we should, or what one thing they should remember. But what for these administrators, what then would they do if you were to think about sort of
so there are a lot of people who should be in the kinds of programs that you run and are not.
Okay, very good. So again, so if you think about both of those things, so the poster, the first message is going to be front and center in the poster. The second thing is to think about, well, sort of, and you'll see we'll look at the design. That second message might also be in there as a sort of a secondary sort of high-level message that could encourage, again, that administrative audience, data audience to pay more attention. Excellent. Very good. You want to share your objective?
Sure. This is actually harder than I thought.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about like a measurement and variance poster
Uh-huh.
that I've done, and I wanted the objective of the poster is to get like people's feedback, like people who have done this kind of research feedback about like the findings of the research and what like how I guess like what the next step would be.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And so my target audience are people who are in a similar discipline and people who are doing research with like scales that can inform the next DSM update. So like very specific experts in the field.
So DSM, that's the depression.
It's a diagnostic
And statistical
manual.
manual. It's the one that lists what are the criteria for all the different
Mental health. It's all the mental health, right? DSM 4 or 5, whatever.
Yeah,
Yes. That's okay. I've done work in depression, so I always associate that with depression, but it's actually
It's everything.
it's everything.
Yeah.
DSM. Okay, so you're all right. So in your discipline, gotcha. And it's both. These are clinicians or researchers or
researchers.
researchers? Okay, great. Okay, and then what's your message?
I wanted to share the findings about the scale. That was like I wanted to show that the scales I'm looking at can be used to measure the same construct as possible.
Okay, great. So again, so you'll want to, and then what would you want these folks to do? I guess you want them to give you feedback.
Right.
On
Yeah.
that. Okay, excellent. All right. So the point of this exercise, and maybe we'll have somebody on the phone. Maybe Tiffany, can Tiffany or Mona maybe? Did you follow what the exercise was about?
Yes.
Can you tell us what your objective is? Is that Tiffany or Mona? I can't tell.
This is Tiffany.
Great. Can you tell us what your objective for your next poster would be?
So I don't have any posters coming up. I'll tell about the one that's in this presentation. I think the objective was to get out some information about a secondary data analysis I'd done, and actually to talk to people so it could help me come up with additional items for the discussion part of the paper.
Okay. Great. That's great. So, and how many people at your poster session? So we want to make it as specific and as measurable as possible. So how many at the poster session, what would have success looked like for you? How many people would you have tried to connect with?
I would say 5 people would have been successful.
Great. Okay. So, and who is the audience? Who are the types of people that would give you this kind of input?
They were women's health nurses, mostly labor and delivery nurses, but also some nurse practitioners and people in academia as well, but all related to women's health.
Okay. And do you have a sense that you would have, if you had maybe done this before, that you might have changed the way you would have presented the information to kind of to focus on that audience, or do you think you kind of covered it generally?
Oh, no, I definitely would have changed it. I set the poster up to look like the paper that was being written, and also to follow some feedback that I got from a presentation I did. And so, the poster would have looked different.
Okay. And what's the message that you would have had for that audience?
So the main message was that dual contraception use hasn't changed in a really long time, and so I was trying to get into a discussion of what's next. How do we deal with the fact that people aren't using dual contraception in high numbers?
Excellent. So that notion about what's next, so I could definitely see that time, and maybe we'll go through your poster in a little while, but I definitely could see using something about what, dual contraception, what's next, or analysis, insights into dual contraception, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
So, right,
Yep.
something along those lines, to kind of encourage people to think in that way. So thank you, Tiffany, for that, and thank you for sharing.
You want to get Mona?
Sure, Mona, can you join in?
Yeah.
Great. So tell us about your objective.
So it's been a few years since I've done a poster, but just kind of looking back at my thesis, like if I were to do something related to that, the objective would be to share information about the prevalence and the high levels of distress among minority women who are trying to conceive.
Great. And who's the audience?
Target audience would be providers within different, probably infertility clinics and OB-GYN clinics as well.
And then what's your message?
I guess the main message would be that there's a need for assessing stress and depressive symptoms among this population and figuring out a system for referrals or finding a way to embed mental health providers in these settings.
Right. So again, with the objective, because you don't have a poster that's sort of right in front of you, it's hard to kind of imagine sort of what exactly what success looks like in terms of the objective, right? So you'd really want to make that as specific as possible, but I think you certainly have a good sense of what the objective would be and a clear sense of the audience. My sense is actually the objective, audience, and message might be actually the basis of a strategy to kind of promote the learnings from your thesis more generally, not only in the context of a poster session, but perhaps even in sort of any advocacy or any kind of programs that you're trying to develop locally or perhaps more broadly.
Yeah.
Right. So again, just thinking, the point of this exercise is to encourage people to, before they kind of jump into any kind of communications work, but particularly the poster, right, is to take a breath and to think about your objective, think about your target audience, and think about your message before. And that doesn't. It may not take that long. It may take 5 minutes. It may take a half an hour. You may want to discuss it with a few people. But it doesn't have to take 6 hours. It doesn't take a lot. But if you're able to do that work, then it may focus the rest of the poster. And we're going to just talk about design, et cetera, from there in very helpful ways. And you'll be clear about what it is that you're trying to accomplish with a poster, as opposed to just simply getting something up in a way that is either not embarrassing or at least follows some kind of model that you think you're supposed to be following, right? So this gives you a way of kind of taking control of the process and developing something that would really work for you. Any questions before we move on? Right? Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Welcome. So here's a little worksheet. We're just talking about posters, and we're talking about strategy and thinking about strategy and message before we do our posters. So again, so that's the first. We've kind of gone through this worksheet. The next part of and we'll spend a good deal of time here, is on the design, right, of the poster. So there are a number of things to think about, and I'm gonna introduce some what are kind of untraditional or unorthodox ways of thinking about the design compared to what we normally do. So let's talk about the basics. So first of all, I would say 95% of the posters that I see have too much text on them. You need to be really cutthroat and to really be ruthless in terms of taking out the things that are not needed, because again, you need to make it readable to people who are moving. And again, that usually means, the text size has to be at least, 24 or 36 point, probably 36 point. The headlines have to be 100. The title has to be at least 110 or 20. the subheads have to be in the 50 to 60 point range, right? So if you're using those kinds of sizes, then you're going to need much less text, much less stuff on the poster, right? Contrast is really important. A lot of times we have these very fancy backgrounds, but unfortunately that messes up the readability. And as I noted earlier, the lighting in the poster sessions is usually terrible. So you really want to focus on a very dark background with light text, or generally a white background with dark blue, dark black text. And then oftentimes a lot of challenges come up because you feel like you have to have all of the pieces of a traditional paper on the poster. But in fact, you can create handouts that include, say the methodology is not that important, or the participant scale, or the list of the participant characteristics is not all that important. Maybe it's just simply a representative sample of a particular community. You can pull the details off onto a separate handout, and therefore that gives you a whole lot more room to deal with in terms of your design. The second thing you want to think about in terms of design, you want to think about grid. So good design is usually organized according to a this kind of tic-tac-toe kind of a grid, and if you can place the grid over the poster so that things sort of line up according to that grid, and it doesn't have to be here it's 4 across and 4 down, or 5 down and 4 across, and they don't even have to be even. But if they're organized in that way, it creates a much more pleasing, much more balanced sort of approach to the design. All right. Second, the other piece, again, this is one of the reasons why we're talking about message, is that you want to figure out what your message is for the poster. You then want to figure out what is the visual expression of that message, and it may be the chart, it may be a graph, it may be a text box, maybe a photo, right, that really captures what it is that you're trying to communicate. So that's why understanding what your message is so important. And oftentimes when people give, I can always tell what that graphic is, because people stop in the middle of describing their poster and they spend all their time on and they may have 6 different graphs or 6 different tables, and they spend all their time on one of them. And I'm like, oh, that's the one, right? And you blow that one up, take some of the other ones perhaps off or make them much smaller, right? And then design the poster around that major graphic so that you can highlight the core data point and data points that are most important. All right. And then, as I noted a little earlier, it's important to get design support, right? You want templates or models, and we have a website called posterbuzz.com, and there are templates there that you can use. I'm going to talk about Better Poster in just a second. They have some templates. You certainly want to get some mentoring or peer review of the science. I will say that most of that mentoring and peer review is really important for the science. It sometimes is terrible for the design. This is just my personal experience, is that because a lot of folks don't have any kind of design experience, and they've just been doing posters the way they've always done them, and they tend to replicate the bad practice around the design. But you also could find graphic, there may be graphics departments. I don't know in the college whether there are graphic designers that are available. In some places there are professionals that can help you work on your poster and make it stronger.
Yeah, our marketing division has a guy who does most of the design work, and he can
provide some support. That's great. All right. So here's an example. This is a study of. I do a lot of work in the aging space, and so our examples are mostly in aging. So this is not a bad poster. It's focusing on the sort of the incidence of cerebral microbleeds. It follows this sort of traditional, the traditional sort of format. There's not a huge amount of text on it, which I think is quite good. But there's all these different pieces, right? And the discussion and the conclusion sort of end up in the bottom right, which is sort of not a great place for us to kind of understand the key message, right? So So we kind of did some work with Jonathan Graff Radford and came up with this. And so if you look at this, right, compared to the previous one, right, what's different about the two? What's different about this one?
Everything's bigger.
Everything is bigger, so there's just less stuff on it. So that just demonstrates my point. So you pull stuff off, you can make everything bigger, you can make everything much more readable. Anything else?
I like the what we learned.
Right. So what we learned. So the message, the core message, is at the top of the poster, right? So that people, as they're walking past, can see the key message and what the most important thing is that you want people to know about. Anything else?
You've gone down from 5 columns to 3, so that condenses.
Right. So it's easier to see that it's easier to manage all of the information at a glance. Exactly. Couple of small things I want to note. So what I found from talking to Jonathan was that if you see that little yellow circle on the right where it says 39, so you can use little pieces to focus on the data points that are really most important and draw the readers or the viewers' attention to that. And then the other piece that is actually quite different is that, so if you see the title, it says Incidence of Cerebral Microbleeds, the Mayo Clinic Study of Aging, which is like a journal title, right? What we suggest is actually a title that is a declarative kind of sentence that actually says what you've learned in the poster, right? So amyloid load increases the risk of cerebral microbleeds, findings from the Mayo Clinic Study of Aging. And again, that along with what we learned gives across the top of the poster a clear sense of sort of what the poster is about, and you don't need to kind of follow, you don't need to get to all the results and the interpretation to understand what that poster is there for, right? All right, so that's one example. So this is another example about advanced care planning that was done out at the University of Colorado. Again, not a whole, there's a lot of, you can see there's a lot of stuff on this text, and this is not terrible practice. They did this, they put this poster up. No one laughed at them. No one, suggested this was terrible. But from a communications point of view, it's quite challenging, right? So if you're the viewer walking around trying to, and again, there are a number of, there's a whole wall of these, right, that you're walking past. How would you know? Why would you stop, right? What would cause you to stop? And in fact, one of the things we learned, and one of the reasons I show this, is that in the conversations around this poster, we found out that if you go to this next one, if you see in the middle this advanced care planning, this was the first ever advanced care planning tool integrated into the electronic health record, right? So that was like a key point, and that's completely lost in all of this. In fact, it wasn't even in the conclusions. Crazily enough. And so when we had this conversation about what the objective was, what the audience was, what the message was, this more secondary point came out as well. You'll see here also that we didn't. I don't know if we changed the title. We didn't change the title, right? We used the same title, but we certainly moved up what we learned and the next steps, so that those ideas were closer and easier to find. As well. So that's, again, a couple of examples about sort of how the design might look. And here is another poster that we worked on with the Johns Hopkins School of Nursing. Again, I think this actually covers a lot of the best practices. You can see it's quite simple. We have what we learned on the top. We have a good solid declarative headline. We have a little bit of background, a little bit of objective, a little bit on the methods, but again, not very much, right? We have one major table around the results. We have the confounders, which were important, and we have a little bit of interpretation, and we're able to actually use a single picture to kind of draw attention to the fact that this is about loneliness, right? So it's got a nice model, and again, we have this up on our website, posterbuzz.com. It's one that you could adapt if you so choose. Let's see. So one thing I wanted to bring up was that, I don't know if folks do you have a question?
Just a general one.
Yeah, sure.
You're filling on the all caps versus single space.
For the headlines, it's fine. I wouldn't use the all caps generally. I mean, I would certainly, when you get, obviously when we get into what we learned, and any of the text is all sentence cap.
I meant the title.
Either. I'm not. I'm less worried about that. I generally don't like the all caps. They've used it. They were using it here, so we stayed with it. If you go, I think you can make it a little. You might be able to make it a little bigger if it's the sentence cap, maybe. because it's not as long, so you can maybe bump up the size. But I don't think it's that important. I think one thing I would mention is that for posters, particularly for the headlines and the subheads, you're going to want to use what are called sans serif type fonts. So like Arial or Calibri that don't have those little tails at the end. Those are actually very helpful in text, in a journal article or in something that you're writing, because that actually enables you to scan a longer line more easily. But for the use of the posters, you really want to use the sans serif fonts. So Tahoma, Calibri, those kinds of Arial, those are better fonts to use on the poster. All right. Any questions for folks on the phone? Mona or Tiffany?
Not yet. I'm taking notes like mad. This is great.
Okay, good. Glad to hear it. All right, so the second thing that I did want to bring up is because this is actually quite a live discussion in this sort of little cottage industry around posters. There's a guy named Mike Morrison, and I should have checked this, but I can't remember. He's in some kind of informatics sort of scientific discipline.
I think he is a psychology student, right?
Oh, maybe that's what it was. Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's a psychology student who focused his dissertation on just creating the importance of creating posters that are better designed.
Better design. So yeah, so he went deep around posters, and he has a hashtag called Better Poster. Has a great, I think it's a 10 or 15-minute video that outlines a similar critique that I was just describing. In fact, he lifts it up even to another level, saying that that the way we do posters is actually undermining sort of scientific discourse more generally, and that they're creating this tremendous missed opportunity for us to share information more effectively. And again, I encourage you to spend 10 minutes to watch the video. It's sort of animated. It's very, I think it's very well done, and I think the critique particularly is spot on. He then suggests a radically different sort of poster format, where he has this large, color block in the middle of the poster, and then the message, the key message, sort of in a single sentence or maybe two, that is large and bold in that green or whatever the color of that box is, and then some results, some methods, and some other information on the other sides, but really diminishing all that information and making all that information much smaller, so that you really are focused on the message that is in that poster. Now, I personally find this limiting, and I will say, to his credit, he's suggesting this sort of radical solution, and then opening it up to the community, the larger scientific community, to come up with improvements in the design. And there are a number of folks that if you look at his feed and you look at hashtag Better Poster, you'll see a number of folks who are, I think, coming up with actually significant improvements on this. We did one. We took that last poster that you saw with the what we learned in the blue that we were describing, and we made some adjustments to it so that we could I think get a little bit more of the scientific information, make that the table and the graph a little bigger. I think that's really important. We also, I think the current use of the current titles are really not very helpful. But again, if we restructure the titles so that they're more declarative, I think the title of the poster can be really helpful. And he kind of puts the title over on one side, and I don't actually agree with that, because I think that's a missed opportunity if you're able to restructure the title. We then include the sort of what we learned in the middle, and then push the stuff to the side as he suggests more broadly. He also includes this QR code on the bottom left, so that you can actually have a fuller discussion of the research online somewhere, so that you can then take a picture of that, use the QR code, and then get access to the full paper or more of the information again, which is a nice innovation, I think, as well.
If you're really hurting for space, you can just print that out on a piece of paper. Poster.
Oh, right.
That's what I do.
Oh, right. That's interesting. So
it doesn't need to be on the
It does-
poster.
Oh, the QR code?
Yeah.
That's smart.
That's interesting. Yeah, so you just tap it up and they can do that. That's nice idea. So again, I think this is part of a sort of an active communication, conversation that's happening in the broader scientific community. This I got from the Better Poster. It was, if you download their template, his template, there are a number of resources behind that original template. And so this is something from Andrew Smith, which I love, which is that we don't have to pick a side. The middle is a fine place to be. So he kind of adapts the poster format, I think, in a helpful way, the better poster format, so that there is something, so that we have something big in the middle. And again, you design around it sort of as we've been suggesting as well. And I think the only criticism here is that we don't see a lot of the data. And I do think that some data, this is scientific communication, and I think the data is really important to demonstrate. And so the challenge, and you'll go to the next poster session, you'll see a number of people using this, and it'll be interesting to see how people actually, some people have actually used this and completely cluttered the whole thing. They crapped the whole thing up actually, and put all the data back into it, and sort of tried to use this format in a very unartful and not particularly effective way. I do think, putting the message strong in the middle is really helpful. I would say that, creating more space for the results and for the sciences is still important, and would encourage people to think about that as they use the poster format. There was also this guy, and it's Derek. I don't know. It's Derek to Plasm. I'm not sure. It's Derek, or maybe it's Derek Crow is his name. Yeah, there it is. And he has a link, and I'll be sharing these slides with you so you can get to this. But he has Butter Poster, okay, and then he has a set of templates that he has a much more sophisticated sort of design sense, and has some other templates that you can use and adapt to that make sense of the principles and the critique that Morrison puts out, which again, I 100% agree with the critique. I think there is a larger discussion about sort of how do we take this complex design challenge and really make it work for the scientific poster session. So I'll be interested, again, I would look forward to folks' experience either with this format, if you've seen it in poster sessions and sort of your reaction to it, and then also your exploration and experimentation with it as you go forward, because I think there is much to kind of to like about it. I think again the application of it is ultimately a challenging graphic design challenge. Challenging on it is a challenge from the graphic design point of view. So
on the QR code, I wonder, Guy, how did you use it? Did people get to the main paper, or did they get your contact information?
So it automatically sent me. It loaded up their email.
The person who.
Yeah, and it auto-populated it with a message that said, like, I would like more information about this research. So then anybody who sent me an email, I would be like, hi, was there any specific questions? Did you want any? I didn't have a paper published yet. So, like, I didn't have a paper to, like, load in. But, yeah, it meant that I had the contact information and kind of a start of a conversation.
Okay. No, thank you. I've never considered using that, and sometimes you're not in front of your poster for the full time.
Yeah.
And I stick up business cards, but then I leave conferences with a ton of business cards and don't contact people.
Right.
But I think technology-wise, that's pretty innovative.
And I think the other thing that people do is they do a 8.5 by 11 inch version of their poster. Again, it's not always that readable, but they have then their contact information on the bottom, and you can put 10 or 15 or 20 of those, you can pin those up. And people may take those if they want to talk to you more. That's a lower tech sort of version, but that's another way of, again, and this is, this is part of the, it brings up a really important point, which is that this is, we're talking a lot about the design and how to do this, but it's really about the engagement with people, right? And the conversations that you're having or not having. And one of the things I would say is that when you go to a poster, when you go to a scientific meeting, you might even look, often, sometimes there are other people's posters that you want to check out. There may be people who are giving talks, and you can send emails to them and encourage them to come to your poster. So if there are 5 people who you really want to weigh in on your poster, and they're going to be at this meeting, you don't want to leave it up to chance that they might find you in the poster session. Go reach out to them, right? Encourage them to come by the poster, or perhaps set up a coffee or something so that you can talk about your work. Again, it's all about the engagement and getting people to join in. All right. So the last thing is about your pitch, right? This is as I noted, this is something that people, again, even if you're focused on the design, you've got your strategy together, you got your message together, you got the design together. People forget about the pitch, right? So you want sort of 30 seconds at least, a 30-second sort of version of your poster that sort of introduces people to your topic so that they can sort of get a quick snapshot, ask a question or two or not, or then move on. Because a lot of things, if you spend 5 minutes with somebody and you don't know who they are because you've just sort of launched into your 5 minutes, the person who you really, or people that you really want to talk to may just walk right by your poster, right? And so you may have a good interaction with somebody, but maybe the wrong person. So you really do want to, make sure that that you have a good, a little bit of a quick interaction with someone to kind of vet them to make sure A, they're interested, and B, they're the kind of people that you really want to talk to. So there are a number of ways that you can do that. Some people they can talk about sort of you can start this elevator speech with or this poster speech with did you know that, and again it's a specific kind of a surprising fact that might sort of engage people. You might again say, oh, you see this person is from the University of Michigan, say, hey, I've been working with X or Y at Michigan. Do you know them, et cetera? That's a way of kind of connecting with them. You can certainly make it personal. You talk about your own story and why this is really important to me because, and kind of connect to make it about you, and maybe or even tell a brief story about a patient or a clinician or some kind of something that's relevant to the poster as well. And again, the point here is that you not only want to prepare that, you want to practice it so that you have it down at least pretty well. What oftentimes happens is that people show up, they haven't really practiced it, they practice it live, right? And they kind of fumble the first few. By the end of it, they're doing just great, and then the last one they're great at, but you kind of muff the first 4 or 5 or 6 opportunities. So why not just practice? Spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes beforehand, kind of working on that 2-minute introduction. The other thing is that some people have talked about sort of standing out a little bit further into the aisle to kind of create a little bit of drag to kind of get people to stop. Again, it's up to your own. If you have your back all the way against the poster, again, it gives people the ability simply to kind of walk by and just sort of look. If you're turned a little bit one way or the other and a little bit further out from your poster, that might also help people, encourage people to stop or to at least take a look at your poster a little differently. So you might think about your own personal, again, what you're comfortable doing, but also how you present yourself in the context of the poster section.
So you're shaking your head. Do you see a lot of people doing that?
Oh no, I just don't.
Right.
The idea of like deliberately making myself like in the path is just.
Well, so you can't sit and you can't be in the middle of the path. then that's too obvious. They're really like, oh, what is this guy doing in the middle of the path? So like, oh, I have to get around. Then you're just an obstacle, right? So what you really want to do is to just be out. I think you just want to make sure you're not with your back against the poster, right? So that you're out a little bit further, so that you're at least offering yourself as someone who's interested in engaging with people that come by. So you want to at least send that message out. You don't want to be scary or intrusive, but you do want to.
And you don't want to hide in your poster.
Yeah, you don't want to hide it. Right, exactly.
I mean, some people get really shy in those circumstances and disappear into the wall like a chameleon.
No, exactly. Some people talk to me about dressing to kind of to be coordinated with their poster, and I don't think that's. I mean, that's if you're
that's next.
If that makes you feel more comfortable or something, that's great. It could be a talking point. I don't think that's particularly necessary. But look, if that works for you, that's great. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about some posters that folks shared with us, and we have about 20 minutes, I guess. To do, or at least 10 or 15 minutes to kind of go through a couple of the posters, and then we can go from there. All right. So, Tiffany, you want to tell us a little bit about this poster?
Yes. So, hold on a second. This is a poster that I presented at the Association for Women's Health Neonatal Nurses Conference this past June. It was, now that I'm looking at it, it is so busy. I'm ashamed. It's a disgrace. But it was a follow-up to a podium presentation that I did at a local Sigma Theta Tau conference. And I was in the middle of writing the paper, and like I said before, wanted some more information about the discussion section. I wanted people to help me. I wanted to hear people's ideas so I could come up with that part of the paper.
So there is no discussion here, right? There's just the conclusions?
So it's the implications piece.
Yes.
Sort of. So that's what I was really focusing on.
Right.
And so I had my thoughts there about, you know, what I was thinking and had already included in the paper, but I wanted people to chime in. And so that's sort of where I guided them. It's set up very much like the paper. It's also set up in probably the same exact sequence that I did the presentation in. It literally is just, I took the slides from the presentation and put them into a poster format.
Yep. Yes, and so again, this is you know, again, this is a very reasonably done, you know, traditional looking poster. There's actually some nice graphics on it. It's nicely balanced, right? And so there are a lot of good things, there. But as you talk about this, right, Tiffany, the whole point of the poster, right, is to get people to, and I don't know if you can see me, but is to really get to this implications piece, and it's on the bottom right-hand corner of the poster where you might be standing in front. You might be standing in front of it, right? So people can't even see it that well.
Yeah.
So I think a number of things, and so I think obviously that needs to be much bigger and much higher in the poster, right? So people can see it, right, a little bit more easily. If you could talk a little bit about so what did we learn about the conclusions suggest that there's an increase in more highly effective contraception, and there isn't a direct association between changes in contraception use and decreased condom use, and therefore no indirect association between changes in contraception use and increased STD rates. So those are the core findings?
Right. Yes.
Okay. So those are kind of core messages, and that might be what we learned, right? And you can make those much bigger as well, I would say. If in terms of the graphics, you have a lot of nice graphics there. Which of the graphics would you where is the story, and where in the poster is the story?
I think the most important graphic is probably, well, for the purposes of what I was thinking,
yeah.
The implication section, those, but for the purposes of thinking about the actual data,
yeah.
It's that piece that talks about significant changes in contraception use and then overall changes in dual contraception use.
So it's this column here, right?
Between the third column and the fourth column. So I don't know that people care to look at like all the output from SPSS or STATA. Most people don't even look at those numbers. All they want to look at is a p-value, which is stupid. But I think I could have taken the tables out completely.
Oh wow. Okay. So again, this is exactly the, and what else on the poster might you take out?
I would have taken out the study inclusion criteria, the whole background piece about the benefits of the Affordable Care Act, and the study purpose and hypothesis. Like that, they don't need to know that.
Okay. And there might be, the other thing is, I would say in the description and that background, if you are going to use text like that, the use of the bullets is really helpful to kind of help people scan the sort of the key points. So one or two kind of key points, and again, in a much bigger font, obviously, that people can read from a distance, right?
Yeah.
So anything else that you might do or change?
I mean, going forward, I'm definitely going to look at that butter poster template. I like that a lot. And I'm going to look at some other templates because this is just really busy. And all it is my paper put on a poster.
Right.
Which is crazy now that I'm thinking about it. I don't write the paper for the same reason that I want to present a poster. So
We have
I'm
that
just
recorded.
rethinking all of that.
Good. I think I need to put that on posterbuzz.com. That is it. I mean, that is the learning in a nutshell, right? Why are we doing
Yeah.
right? It's not the same reason we're doing a paper, and the requirements, the what we call the rhetorical requirements of the scene. That's the jargon from the communications world. The communications requirements of the environment and the poster are so different than a regular paper that you can't simply apply one to the other. Well, thank you. We're going to do, I think we have one other poster that I think we should do.
I think it came from Debbie Clegg.
And is Debbie here or no?
No, Debbie's not here.
Okay, so, and one thing.
Rip into it.
Yeah, well,
Fair enough.
so, I mean, and again, I mean, this gives you, again, it's the columns are good. You know, I think there's a desire there around the, and again, the other thing that I would want to mention is that, you know, different kinds of research kind of suggest different kinds of approaches. So, you know, these PET scans, if you have PET imaging, right, there's a lot of visual. If you go to conferences where they have a set of imaging sort of slides or topics, you'll see there's lots of their posters look a lot different because all of their stuff are scanned. They should have picture after picture of scan, right? And that actually, so it's like, oh great, it's visual. And then they have like 20 scans on there that are tiny. And you kind of go like, well, hold it, which is the, oh yeah, that one. It's like these two are the ones that are important. You're like, okay, well, can we have two normal ones and these two over here? And then we're done, right? So it's the same kind of process, but it can look quite different. So what might we suggest in terms of improving this poster?
Take out the wording, number one. I don't want to sit there and read.
Yeah, so this is like, you know, this is like a thick outline for for a paper, right? So that's great. So you can, and maybe it came from the paper, you know, who knows? But again, for a poster, it's way too much.
I think it's hard to tell because I have terrible vision, but
yeah, well, it's not that
the
good.
diagrams look pretty good, so it might also be worthwhile to just like, if the diagrams could be organized in such a way that they just kind of flow through what you would need to know with just captions.
Yeah.
And then like a brief results conclusion section, it's like, that might be better than what looks like there's a lot of explanation to what's going on.
Yeah, no, I think that's very helpful.
Because it like explains what the different cohorts are, and they involve mice, sunlight, and snow, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think just having that and then having the different results underneath it, you know, you wouldn't have to kind of explain what happens. You could just say to anyone who wonders, this is what happiness, sunlight, and snow mean.
Yep. So, and I would say, so a couple things, other thoughts before I jump in?
Like getting rid of the words, as Tiffany said, like the references and acknowledgments, like we don't need those sections.
Right, so the references you can definitely put on another page or put in the, put behind the QR code. That's certainly something you can take off.
Unless you're looking for people to work with, future directions might be a little, like.
Right, it would depend on your objective.
For,
Right, yeah, so that would be important one way or the other. You might not, there are a lot of future directions, right? So it's like, okay. And again, part of this is, again, generally in terms of your paper, if you have like 7 findings or 10 findings, you put all 10 findings in there, right? But in a poster, you have to really pick the top one. What's the most important thing, right? How, 1 or 2 maybe, or 3 at the most, right? You can't have these long lists of findings and expect people to get them, to understand the poster at a glance efficiently.
Well, I'll retract my statement about acknowledgments, because if it's funded by an organization, you do want to acknowledge
Yeah, you have to have some kind of acknowledgments.
But I usually do it like straight across the bottom, so it's just like one line. And it's,
And the other thing is like there's all this background, right, which has a lot of things on it that might be interesting, but I think that may be too much. And then the hypothesis, which actually helps us to understand why we're here, right, is tucked on the very bottom and is very difficult to find. So I would think about sort of where these sort of end up and sort of what's most important, what's less important. And then finally, the headline is again another missed opportunity. You know, what actually did we learn? And again, it should probably have something to do with the conclusion and what we learned from the paper that way, or the research that way. All right, so this gives you a little practice at sort of looking at the traditional posters. Hopefully you go to the next poster session. Hopefully your next poster will look somewhat differently. This is the first one we ever did. This was back in the day when they actually did posters on 8.5 by 11-inch pieces of paper and put them up, right? So that was the old technology. And then people got this new technology, and it didn't really help them particularly because they kind of just reproduced this in a PowerPoint slide, basically. So there's more color, but it didn't really actually help the communications. So we came up with this, ended up coming up with this sort of what we learned focus as well, much less information. There were all these, we made the two biggest tables and graphs much bigger, a lot of the same things that we talked about in the past, much different title as well. All right, so just to remind folks as we kind of get down here towards the end, 4 steps, right? Think strategy, think about your message, take a breath, right? Do that work first. You don't need a lot of time, even if you don't have enough time, right? Spend that 15 minutes, that 20 minutes thinking about sort of what's most important, what you're trying to achieve and what's most important, because that then will help you order help you kind of set up the design so that the most important things are featured in the poster. It'll help you write the poster title, and it'll help you ultimately maybe perhaps create a what we learned or some kind of, if it's in the middle, like a better poster thing, it'll help you write that sentence or two as well. And then ultimately work on your design, and if you're flying somewhere you maybe have time when you're on the airplane to practice your pitch quietly, but to definitely spend some time thinking about that as well. All right, so those are the 4 steps. Sort of for more help, you can email me. We have a site called posterbuzz.com, and I'll show you that in just a second. You can engage graphic designers, in the area here and at the college. You could offer, if you have a connection to a graphic design class, you could offer your poster as a design challenge for them, get a little free help. And again, you might want to contact your the school publications or graphic design office to help in that way as well. This is posterbuzz.com. We've had it there for a while. There are the poster U is basically a version of this talk that I just gave, so it'll has a lot of that information. We have a whole bunch of templates and examples that you can download and use. There are resources where we send people to other places, and other information that can be helpful as well.
Great.
So.
All right. Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, this was very helpful. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Yeah, and as you develop your next poster, again, feel free to send a draft through, and happy to again help respond to the poster and give you some consulting.
So for those of you who joined us a little late, we did record the session. So once I have it edited, just cut the front and the end off. I'll throw it up in the hub so you can get it, as well as the resources that John has shared with us in the hub.
Okay, thank you. Apologies, I was at the Dean's Age-Well Collaboratory.
Yeah, actually, I missed that one because I was supposed to be there too.
Yeah, competing.
Yes.
But I do have to say, I was a Hartford scholar, so I had to go through your training a few years ago, and my posters look like the ones they truly do, the way they redesigned, the ones like, what did we learn? And,
good.
People at Penn Nursing use your method as well, because many of us had gone through your training.
Excellent.
Yeah, so awesome, thank you.
Yeah, maybe if you would post one of those to the hub too.
Share.
Yeah, that would be helpful. So folks
Yeah, send it to me and I'll put it where it goes.
Okay,
that would be great. That'd be great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, in fact, I'm going over to. It's so strange. So I'm doing I do sort of 6 or 7 of these a year generally, right? But I'm doing one today. I'm going over to Penn Geriatrics tomorrow, and then I'm doing something down at Johns Hopkins on Monday. So it's like 3 days in a row. It's just it all sort of landed in the same place. So that's. I should be pretty sharp on the posters by the time we're done here.
Great. So thanks. So next week we're in with we've got Stephanie Ewing and Min Jung Shim talking about career advice, doing sort of a second round of that sort of stuff. The week after that, Tiffany is doing a public presentation, Black Americans in Nursing Education, Past, Present, and Recommendations for the Future. That's going to be a little bit later in the day, starting at noon. We've begun advertising that to invite more people to attend that session. And I think I sent you guys sort of a rough draft of the of what I was thinking about when we're going to offer these out. I haven't gotten much feedback yet, so if you can just confirm that the date works for you, that would be terrific. All right. Oh, hey, Mona, I got one quick question for you. The YouTube link that you shared, is that the butter poster guy?
That's for what was his name? Mike Morrison. That's the
Better poster. Cool.
Yeah.
I'll make sure I put that up too. So
Yeah, definitely watch the video. It's very it's lively, it's entertaining, and I think it's really spot on.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. I really enjoyed watching it and learned a lot. I think they did a good job creating it.
The only problem is that I've gone now and I've seen those posters up, and they really don't look. If you have them like lined up one after the other, it sort of creates a sort of a numbing. If you kind of slavishly follow the template, it doesn't create a great effect, and it doesn't help you compete. As long as you're a first mover and you're early in, then it does get your attention. But if there's 6 other ones right next to yours, they're like, oh, it's the same green one. You're like, okay, and then it doesn't have that. It needs to show. It needs to describe your specific, approach in some different way. That's my point of view of this.
All right. Well, thanks everybody.
Sorry, I just got a quick question. So about the talks that the postdocs are giving,
yeah,
are they all going to be open? Like, what audience are we expecting?
Well, I mean, it's mostly our fellow postdocs. We're inviting it to open to other PhD students and other students and faculty around the college.
Okay.
I'm creating a RSVP link, so I'll get some sense of who's actually going to be in the room, depending on how people respond to the topic. So that might, I'll share. If you'd like, I could share that with you a couple days beforehand, so you have a sense of who's responded.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Thank you.